Hello, and welcome to the Metta Hour podcast with Sharon Salzberg. I'm Lily Cushman. I produce this podcast, and we're coming to you today with episode 270, which is the second of a two-part episode from the archives, Lovingkindness in Difficult Circumstances. This was recorded in the early 2010s when Sharon paid a visit to Asheville, North Carolina for a weekend teaching on lovingkindness in difficult circumstances. So today is part 2. If you're just tuning into this, you might want to go back to episode 269 and catch the first half of the teaching. So in this part, Sharon dives into all things lovingkindness, starting with the word lovingkindness and the translation from Metta, M-E-T-T-A, which of course you know is the name of this podcast, but also happens to be on the top of the building of the Insight Meditation Society. And Sharon tells that story of how that came to be. She looks at a lot of the cultural baggage of the word love in our society and some of the difficulties around how you translate the word metta into English, how different people do that, and some of its different meanings. She goes on to talk about how we can look for the good and some of the bias that we have in this culture around kind of denying joyful, good, and positive experiences, and how important that is in the broader context of our well-being. She shares some hilarious stories about how to make a gratitude list and a lot of our conditioning around gratitude, how we're biased to look for the negative, look for the bad. And she also tells her only joke in this podcast, so look out for that. The recording goes on to take some questions from audience members, covering a whole variety of things, some specifics about how we can balance concentration and practice, how we can work with the space between the breath when we're doing breath meditation, and then some broader questions like how we can find openness despite our conditioning, how we can let go of grievances, as well as the Buddhist approach to intention and motivation. So let's dive right in. This is Lovingkindness in Difficult Circumstances, Part 2.
So thank you. That was a lovely interlude. I want to say a little bit more about lovingkindness, and then we can just hang out and have a discussion. So in addition to this kind of quiet way that lovingkindness and compassion can develop, there are certainly practices that are specifically dedicated to trying to deepen those qualities, and that's what we'll do a lot of tomorrow. The word lovingkindness itself is kind of peculiar, I know. It's the most common translation of this word in the Buddhist tradition, Metta, M-E-T-T-A. Those of you, I know some of you have been to the retreat center I co-founded in Massachusetts, the Insight Meditation Society, or their literature. Our literature may be here, it tends to follow me around. And it's a large brick building with white pillars and it has this word up above, Metta, M-E-T-T-A. We moved in 1976. I came back from India in 1974. And we co-founded, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, and I co-founded the retreat center in 1976. And at the time we bought it, it was a Catholic novitiate. It was run by the Fathers of the Blessed Sacrament, and that's what it set up above the doorway. So we moved in on Valentine's Day. It was really cold, and we got someone to get up on a ladder, a very tall ladder, on a very cold day, and we said to them, could you please rearrange those letters so that it says something about us and what we represent in the world? And so they got up there and they played around with the letters, and they came up with Metta, M-E-T-T-A, which means loving kindness, or is usually translated as loving kindness. And what then followed was this big debate, as many of you, I'm sure, have started something kind of new or innovative, and you're not on really sure ground. You don't know what is right or wrong. And so we had this big debate, like, why don't we have a word in English? Nobody knows what that means. You know, we're not in Asia anymore. It doesn't make any sense. But the point of view, which I happen to have, that really wanted it to stay, prevailed, because here we are all these years later and it's still up there. And the reason I like it is because, a delivery person or somebody will call asking for directions, and whoever answers the phone will say it's a large brick building with white pillars and it's got this word up above, Metta. And then they usually say, what does that mean? And we say that means loving kindness, or that means love. Loving kindness is the common translation. I think it's a little problematic because the word is not so commonly used in our society. It's like if you're in a cafe or a waffle place in Hickory, like I was earlier today, you would not really expect the conversation at the next table necessarily to include the word loving kindness. It might, but likely it would not. And so my concern is that that might make the trait itself, the quality of itself, seem somewhat arcane and removed from day-to-day life, which it's not. The word love, of course, and some scholars prefer that as a translation, is very complicated for us. We can mean so many different things when we say love. Sometimes we really frankly mean a medium of exchange, like I will love you as long as you love me in return, or as long as the following 15 conditions are met. I once used that example somewhere, and someone in the room called out only 15 conditions, so I will love you as long as, or I will love myself as long as I never make a mistake, right? And we know that quality, but we also know how breakable it is, how fragile it is. I mean, really, I will love myself as long as I never make a mistake. So that's not really what metta means. The literal translation of the word is friendship. So it means having a spirit of friendship toward yourself, toward others, toward life itself. That doesn't mean complacency. It doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean you don't have values. It doesn't mean you're not strong or even forceful. It means that you have a deep, deep sense of being connected. Connected to yourself, your inner strength, a sense of inner abundance, and connected to others. It doesn't mean you like everybody. It doesn't mean you like anybody. But you have this deep sense that our lives have something to do with one another. That everybody in some way counts. That it's very interesting to me at the time we live in, because this idea of connection or interconnection isn't just contained in spiritual pursuit. Science teaches us this, and economics teaches us this. And environmental consciousness certainly teaches us this, that what happens over there doesn't nicely stay over there. It ripples out over here. And what we do over here, it matters, because we live in an interconnected universe. Even epidemiology teaches us this. Did any of you see the movie Contagion? Well, we have a very old friend who used to work in the smallpox campaign in India, who was a technical advisor on the film. And so he brought me to the opening in New York City. And basically, it was like modeled, it was a scientifically accurate possibility. It wasn't just like a wild kind of made up thing. So basically in the film, day 1, somebody has a really bad day in Hong Kong. Day 4, half the earth is wiped out. And it was the kind of theater-going experience where, like, if somebody sneezed, everyone else, like, cowered, like, oh my God, like, what do you know? So the idea of interdependence or interconnection isn't romantic. It's not sentimental, and it's not always pleasant. But it's the truth of things. That our lives have something to do with one another. And that's that feeling tone, the heart's response to that is what we mean by metta. Not that we like everybody, and not that we're going to be a patsy or a doormat or invite everyone to move in with us or say yes all the time or give money to everybody who asks. It's not about that, but it's in the heart space. In fact, Nim Karoli Baba, whom I mentioned, was amongst the sayings he's very well known for is the saying, never throw anyone out of your heart. Never throw anyone out of your heart. And one of my colleagues, this friend, Sylvia Borstein, had a kind of addendum to that where she said, never throw anyone out of your heart. You might throw them out of your life, but never throw them out of your heart. We don't know what we will decide through discernment is the best course of action to take in a particular circumstance, in a particular context. Maybe it's really mellow and sweet. Maybe it's really fierce and, very with strong boundaries and saying no. We don't know that. But the heart space can be one of inclusion and care. So that's the nature of loving kindness, is that bone deep recognition of the fact that our lives are connected. And so the corollary to that is that everybody counts, everybody matters. Loving kindness in difficult circumstances is something that I extrapolated from this recent book as a topic, as something to look at. We train the mind in paying attention differently so that maybe we have the habit, as one example, looking at ourselves pretty well only thinking about what's wrong. Maybe we have the habit at night of looking back at our day, kind of evaluating ourselves as though to say, well, how did I do today? Let's just say. And maybe in that we pretty well only remember the mistakes we made, the things we didn't say quite right, and the really stupid thing we said at lunch, at that meeting, let's just say. Perhaps so much so that our whole sense of who we are and all that we will ever be just collapses around that really stupid thing we said at lunch at the meeting. So the process of loving kindness is like stretching. It's like almost like saying, anything good happened today? Any good within me? It's not delusional and it's not phony. It's not make-believe. It's not like saying, oh, what a brilliant and witty thing I said at lunch at the meeting. Maybe it was really stupid. And there are consequences for that. But that's not all that we are ever. So it's that collapse, that over-identification that we're challenging. So that's the practice, is to stretch. Not to ignore and say, oh, it's perfect, but to include that which may get very little airtime. The good within us, the good in others. And if we can't see the good in others, then to remember, we all want to be happy. We actually all want to be happy. And it's through ignorance that we do the things that can create so much suffering for ourselves and for others. But we all really want to be happy. There's so much that we share in life. So this is something that we bring up when things are going really well, but we might be kind of half asleep and complacent and not really taking them in. Remember to look at what is good. There's a lot of popular research these days says that one of the most powerful healing things any one of us can do each day is just keep a gratitude journal, to write down 3 things at the end of the day that you're grateful for from the day. And I always say one could be that you're breathing. It doesn't have to be really grandiose. And I also say that, my cultural conditioning is not one where that comes naturally. I'm trained to come to the end of the day and think what I can complain about. How can there possibly be one person working at Newark Airport retrieving baggage from flights that got canceled? 6 flights got canceled. I mean, really, does that make sense that there is one human being who has to go to God knows where they go, like some cavernous place, getting bags? I mean, what about that poor guy? He had to go all the way to LaGuardia waiting for his, he's waiting for his bag. And what about that person? My problem was the least of it. And even I was so inconvenienced. And right? That's more what I'm trying to. I was teaching somewhere with Krishna Das actually some time ago, and one of the people playing music with him was trying to teach us jokes. So here's the joke. It's my only joke. I'm hoping to see him again in March and learn another joke, but here's the joke, which I may not do very well, but it's New York City, and this group of women is sitting at a table at a restaurant, and the waiter comes up to them and says, "Is anything all right?" Contrast to, "Is everything all right?" That's how I was trained to do. Probably why. I'm from there. So for me to come to the end of the day and think, okay, what do I have to be grateful for, is a stretch. It takes intentionality. It's like a sense of purpose. It's a sense of exploration and experimentation. This is not what I'm used to. Let me try it out. But it's not phony. It's not like saying, wonderful system, luggage handling at Newark Airport, couldn't be better. And this is the crux of the question. Can we find strength in places where we actually might assume will be weakened? And of course, that's the experiment. We believe, yes, of course. Very powerful to have that sense of connection. And the actions we take based on that would be more clear and more effective, rather than feeling so fragmented and so overcome by an emotion like anger. It's not that anger is all bad. It has some powerful energy in it. But there's a way we get overcome, right? It's like if you think about the last time you were really, really angry at yourself. I don't know how long ago that might have been. But that's probably not a time where you also thought, I did 5 good things this morning too. Mentally. So it's that collapse, that tunnel vision, that certainty, that's all that I am. That's what we challenge. And so I really see it's a tremendous experiment to see, are there different ways of responding in this same situation? And to give it a shot. It's very interesting. It's not like we will always get what we want and it will always be so magnificent, because life is life. It's mixed. But we will be a whole lot happier. And also be coming from a place of much greater truth. It was so great for me yesterday seeing that Buddhist monk. First, his line was like 5 times longer than mine. Mine was long enough. But, the way the lines goes is like every once in a while we'd be like, because you have to go through those rope sick things. And So every once in a while he'd be coming toward me, then I'd see him going away, and then he'd be coming toward me. It's like, oh, right. That's a possibility. And then you'd be going away. And there it was. In the sea of people, like, screaming and freaking out. And I can understand the freak out. I thought, it seemed like a good idea to go to Asheville. Be like, what if I don't make it by Friday night? Wouldn't that be bad, But still, we suffer so much. And what's already maybe a complicated, uncomfortable, difficult situation, we don't have to add all of that. And so it's a question of remembering what we really care about, remembering where happiness lies, remembering where strength lies, and then using mindfulness to realize I have a choice here. I actually don't have to yell at this person who's just working here. I can be forceful, I can be strong, I can be insistent even, but maybe I don't have to be so hostile. And that opens up our lives, because then we have so much room to be creative and to experiment and to find our way in all of life's situations. So what are you all thinking? Do you have any questions or comments? Anything you'd like to talk about? We have a microphone, which would be fantastic if you could use.
I can really project. My name's Lorraine. You really can't. I'm flapping you. So I was in Atlanta Monday to see the Dalai Lama, and this is much better.
Okay, what?
So a lot of times, my biggest, I can't tell the difference between joy for me or gratitude. They're all kind of connected there. But right beneath, it isn't even hardly a surface. When that feeling comes up of that gratitude, there is a tremendous sadness right beneath that. It's a real warning. And I mean, I'm a medical person, so immediately I diagnosed myself, and it just, I just get this confusion or frustration with, what is that? Should I do something about it? I feel like it's the sorrow of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's my thought, was that I think there's a fine line for us, and, I don't know if you're coming tomorrow, but we'll talk much more about compassion also. But there's a lot of poignancy in this life that we have this joy, and maybe everyone has the potential, but not everyone has the access internally or externally. People can have so much, you feel so impoverished. People can live. If everybody really wants to be happy, which I believe, it's also clear not everyone is living in a way that will accomplish that. It's a little bit like knowing someone who says they're really lonely, and then you watch how they speak to people who try to help them out. You think, well, no wonder. But it's so poignant, because that urge to connect and be happy is genuine, but it just can't figure out how to make it work. There is a kind of sorrow, I think, that waking up brings us to. But when it gets too much, then we get depleted. Because we're refusing to connect to our own joy, or we're feeling too responsible sometimes to make it all better, which we can't. It's like we can do what we can do, but we can't just say poof, it's all better. So that is also an exploration in itself. It's where's that line, and can we learn the felt sense, the visceral sense of going over the line and then coming back? It's of course, today my favorite part of being on the airplane like for many people, the safety announcements that are so commonly used in kind of spiritual discourse these days, where the flight attendant says, in the event of a cabin pressure dropping and the oxygen mask comes down, put your own on first before you try to help anybody else. It's like that's something we often forget. And just as an image, as an idea, so many of my colleagues use it and write about it and so on. I said to somebody once, I think I can't say it anymore because it's just become a cliche, put your own oxygen mask on first. And then the person I was talking to, told me this story. She said, I was just on an airplane and they made that announcement and the person in the seat next to me said, I could never do that. And I thought, maybe I can keep using it. Right. So it's all in there. I think that's all part of it in some way.
One of the things I noticed, after practicing for some time is that in concentration practice, it's like I'm having a hard time finding the balance between being too concentrated and not concentrated enough. And it's a metaphor for my life anyway. But I wonder, how to work with that. Because sometimes, even tonight, I found myself almost sweaty, with concentrating on my breath. And so wonder how to have a let loose of that a little bit. Find that balance.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, I'm sure the essence is balance. And there are ways we could be working with being very present, but without being tight. Like I was once teaching somewhere, it was a non-residential weekend, and it was Saturday morning. And I use the word concentration because that's the word, I've been using it for 40 years. It's a common translation. And somebody came up to me and he said, how much money would it take for me to offer you, for you to promise not to use the word concentration again for the rest of this weekend? And I said, let's talk. And so clearly for him, concentration meant something like really tight, like, drive your attention into the breath and hold on to it and resent and reject anything else that comes up. And I said, how would it be for you? Would it work for you if every time I said concentration, because that's just the way I'm used to saying it, you translated that in your mind to settle, just so, or center, or rest? And he said, that would work. And I said, you just saved yourself a lot of money. So sometimes we look at things like that. Sometimes there is too much effort. And then you can just relax. The important thing to remember about everything is that we're always going to have to begin again. And that's okay. We would all like the perfect fix. Like, okay, I relaxed and then I stayed relaxed for the rest of my life. But it's unlikely. Mostly you'll have to remember again and remember again. But that's okay. That's not second best. That really is how the process works. It's probably how everything works, actually. And there are also ways in which it's almost like a specificity of that imbalance that could sometimes be the case. So, for example, when I was first practicing, one of the many reasons it was very difficult for me, I realized, was that because almost as soon as this breath was happening, I was sort of mentally leaning forward to get ready for the next 50. And that habit of mind was something that existed in me, not just because I was sitting in a funny posture on the floor in India. That was very much my habit. I was very frightened. I was very wary. I was very guarded. I didn't know what might happen next. A lot had already happened to me in my life. And so for me, at that time, balance looked like settle back. Let the breath come to you. I used to say to myself, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. Because I had so much performance anxiety, it's like I'd never done it before. Just say, settle back. Let the breath come to you. And of course, we might be way too far back. It's like we couldn't care less what the breath feels like, and we kind of have to mentally come forward more and engage and participate. I wouldn't want to encourage you, any of you, to sit there and think, am I too far forward? Am I too far back? You know? But sometimes we just know. It's like the intuition arises, like, step back. Let the breath come to you. And so then you can just follow that. And over time, it really does come to a different kind of balance. It really does. Something will happen. Something will happen. Now, if I had written to any of my friends, I mean, I wrote to Raghu because it was, I'm in the airport. My flight's an hour late, and then I'm in the airport. They just canceled it. I'm online, you know. But if I'd written to, like, he was kind enough not to do this, but if I'd written to like 90% of my friends and said it was happening, they all would have written back and said, something will happen. Thank you.
Thank you. During your talk, you made a gesture of opening, and you said space. Will we cover more of that tomorrow? Because that really hit home to me, especially in this day and age. How do you, whatever, maybe we have a belief system that it's just seems to be, we think is so right and it's so hard to open. How can you do that?
I think we open, or I open, let's put it that way, in many ways. Sometimes it's because through mindfulness, I can look at the different things, we can look at the different things that close us down. And in seeing that, like when I was describing anger, I'm not talking about feeling anger, we're talking about being overcome by anger, really being lost in it. It does give us a kind of tunnel vision. I am always saying the wrong thing. That's all that I have, you know? And if we can see that and let go of that, then we find space. So the example I commonly use is talking about looking at my own mind and looking at fear. And when of course, it's not easy to look at these things, but when we actually practice mindfulness and we can pay attention to them instead of just being, oh my God, you know, I've been practicing meditation for 40 years and I still feel this. This shouldn't be here. Spend all this money in therapy. Why is it still here? You know, but that's what the training is, to actually help us look. Then we learn a lot. So one of the things I learned about my own fear was that, by and large, in contrast to the common statement that we're afraid of the unknown, I mean, of course, I can be afraid of the unknown too, but mostly I get really afraid when I think I do know, and it's going to be really bad. So it's those stories I tell myself, that's the worst. And when I remind myself, actually, you don't know, it's like, then your space. It's like, oh, I don't know. That's a relief. You know, so that's something I observed, just to pay attention. And it really gave me an avenue to realize I have options here. You know, I don't have to just be lost in this one reaction. And then there's a lot, which we will go through tomorrow, about loving kindness and space, or spaciousness.
Oh, there's two. Thank you. Hi, Sharon. Thank you. Hi. I had this experience about a week and a half ago where my feelings were hurt. And to this conversation I was kind of having in this group, kind of in a meeting, this more experienced person. And through some where is going on in my life, you know, heading in this direction, and needing to make some changes now. And I do have to be meeting up with this person in a couple of weeks. And so with these hurt feelings, I was feeling really kind of small, and, you know, and had my whole story out of like, you angered me this way, and it, you know, went on and was holding on to this for like a week. And I was really kind of angry that, you know, like, I just want to get this over with, you know, that I need a story, you know, And so I got another week. What's happened? It's just kind of funny, but it's given me some space where there's some letting go that I had in the last couple of days, and it has something to do with this quality, loving kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's really kind of difficult to hold on to what you feel like I need to, and what I need to just I just need to be a part in it. So I don't know if you could maybe speak to.
Well, I think it's really fascinating. It's like an experiment, it's like a big exploration, because I think we're taught over and over again that holding on to a grievance and holding on to a grudge and is what, being vengeful even is what's going to make us strong. But sometimes you just look at it in that same quality of observation, you think, wow, I'm spending 90% of my life's energy thinking about this other person, and I've given over so much to them. I want to bring it back. I want to own it, rather than just be. It's like when you go through the list of someone's faults, so then you do it again, and then you do it again. It's like same faults. It's not like you discover new ones. It's just like, oh yeah, it's like, all right, it's like been a long time going over that list. So some of it has to do with that. And some of it has to do with, we will go over this much more tomorrow. It's like understanding that we can take responsibility for our motivation, for seeing where we're coming from in what we do or what we say. And in Buddhist thought, this is a little different than Western thought, where the intention or the motivation behind an action doesn't really count for much. But in Eastern psychology, it's very, very crucial. Like if I reach down and pick this up and offered it to one of you, it's very nice. All anybody sees is my hand moving down and picking up an object and moving it forward, right? But what's in my heart that is sparking that action? Maybe I'm offering it to you because I like you and I want you to have it. Or maybe I'm offering it to you because the camera's going and I just gave this big talk on generosity and I want everyone to think I'm a really generous person. Or I see you have a coffee mug I really like and I think, well, hey, and you'll give me that. Maybe, I'm offering it to you because I don't like you. And I think, well, you're going to think this is filled with tea, carefully brewed and imbued with honey and lemon. It's just water, huh? Same smile, same gesture, but coming from a very different place. Or a million other possibilities, right? So that's why the motivation behind an action is very interesting. We practice mindfulness to kind of know where we're coming from. And it's said, interestingly enough, that practices like loving kindness meditation transform our field of motivation. So if we have largely been coming from a place of fear or a sense of alienation, and we do something like loving kindness practice, we will find ourselves coming from a place of connection in what we do or what we say. So that's one level of an action. And then there's the skillfulness or unskillfulness of the execution. That's what I meant by discernment. It's like we might be coming from a really loving place, but we might stop and think, there's a lot of people in this room. I've only got one flask. Maybe I should offer it privately or do it in this way. It's like we do our best to be sensitive to context, where we are, to do things in the most skillful way possible. And then the third aspect of an action is the immediate result. And this is especially around, it's both around immediacy, which we'll talk about tomorrow, and also around praise or blame. like maybe I'm very carefully, I look at my motive. I have a beautiful, generous motive in wanting to give it to you. I do it as sensitively as I can, as skillfully as I can, but you checked your cell phone messages just before walking in here, and you just found that you just won $10 million in the lottery. It's like you could not care less about this flask. And you sort of nod distantly and you walk away. That's the place that we pretty well obsess about. Oh my God, they didn't thank me. He didn't say it was the best thing they've ever gotten in their whole life. An idiot. What if it was going to be the wrong thing? And it's not to say we don't have things to learn in situations and from feedback, but that absolute sense of giving over our sense of who we are to someone else's reaction, it's hopeless, because you can't say to somebody, something's going to happen at noon. I want you to come into the room not having checked your cell phone messages, not having checked your email, not having had a single conversation, and not thinking about a single thing. I want your mind to be totally blank when you come in, because something's going to happen. It's like, life's not like that, So there's such a mix of where we're coming from, where someone else is coming from, what we can affect, what we can't affect. And learning to be able to kind of more graciously let God. We'll close now in a few minutes. I'll tell you the story, one of my favorite stories from the Buddhist tradition, kind of in that light, which I often bring up in my mind. There's some story about the Buddha was doing something that angered this farmer. I don't know if he was like walking on his land or something without permission or something. So this farmer got just enraged at him and went over to him and started yelling and screaming and abusing him and cursing at him. And the Buddha said, "Oh, farmer, what happens if you nicely prepare a gift for somebody and you put it in your hand and you go to give it to them and they won't take it out of your hand?" And the farmer said, "Well, then I guess it remains with me." And the Buddha said, "Just so, I'm refusing your gift of screaming and yelling and reviling and cursing. It's going to remain with you." It's like, you don't have to say that to somebody, but you can know it inside, and so things are different. Okay, we have time for just one or two more questions, and then...
And I had a dumb story that happened today. You could use in a phrase, something will happen. And this is going to kind of be my mental image from now on. I'm the mother of an autistic 27-year-old. He lives in a great group home in Chapel Hill, though. And all week, we've had the drama of getting her costume of Cleopatra to her time. So today I go to him and I went, "Oh, God, half of it's missing." So I panicked. So finally I called Raleigh to see if it was at the house there. I finally said, "I'll just call. I just can't, nothing I can do." And I wouldn't then come tonight if I couldn't get it settled. Well, she's not been able to get her converter box set up on her cable TV for 4 months. So I calmly asked her, "Do you have the other half of the Cleopatra?" "No, but guess what? I have a Japanese channel on the converter box." She didn't care. And I was like, "Oh, God." It's almost like I can hear the choir singing. Her gospel and channel. But that's her focus now. She's happy, and I have saved. I mean, seriously, it's Sean. But when they have autism and that escalate, the whole decom would have been making me if I didn't solve the Cleopatra problem. And now it's solved by one Japanese channel. So something will happen.
Something will happen.
Yeah. So.
Great. Bravo.
Oh, I like Sharon. Where are you?
I'm a director.
Oh, thank you. Just wondering, in my practice, there is, the breathing in and the breathing out. And then I'm noticing sometimes that there's that space between the breaths. And I'm noticing that I'm not breathing. It's just resting. And I wonder, then, I observe that and then continue to breathe. But I wonder, what you would have to say about that space to the breaths that seem so deeply restful.
Yeah. It is often deeply restful, and it's great. You can just be with it, just be aware of it, just rest there. Sometimes people feel a little ungrounded, like they would prefer to have a physical object to rest their attention on, even in those times. And that's where if that's the case, then we introduce like touch points, which are an area about the size of a quarter, say. I was teaching in Europe in May, and I was trying to use this example, and I said about the size of a small coin, but around the size of a quarter, where the bodies are in any contact. Maybe your hands are touching your knees, something like that. So you might just go from, if you're with the breath at the abdomen, from there to that during that pause. Or if you're with the breath at the nostrils, then the touch of the lips, something like that. But you don't have to. It's really, if you can just be in that space and you don't feel like you're just drifting away, then enjoy it, you know? Okay. Get your mind.
I am just flabbergasted by what you've been saying and the way you've been saying it. I heard about you from my daughter who was in Berlin. Yeah, and I love my sangha here. I went to another one in Virginia, and I'm really wiped out from being there. I think there is a continuum, and I wouldn't even want to put it into words, but my daughter was right. You take techniques and concepts that can be very complicated, and you make them so simple, and you use humor, which is what I love about my Sangha here in town. The person he founded it does the same thing. So I am just so grateful to finally hear you in person.
Thank you. Thank you very so much. And we're going to stop here because some people will want me probably to sign books, and so that will take a little bit of time. So I don't know if you have any more announcements or for. Nope. Okay, well, I'll see some of you tomorrow. We start at 10, and there'll be a lunch break at noon, I think, and then we'll continue on till 4. Yeah, it'll be really fun.
Hey folks, thanks for listening. You've made it all the way to the end of the podcast. So thanks for being here. If you'd like to learn more about all things Sharon, including her online courses, her many different books, as well as guided meditations, you can head over to her website. That's SharonSalzberg.com. This podcast is brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. May you be safe. May you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease.